Hi students, my name is Pandika and I'm your social studies educator at Study Room. Today we are going to cover a different topic, a different chapter, which is understanding our criminal justice. In order to understand this chapter, let's directly dive into it. Alright, so let's understand the criminal justice of India through a story. Okay, so there is an example of a story through which we would understand the basic of the criminal justice of India, as in how does it work. So the story begins from a fine morning wherein Mr. and Mrs. Shinde are in a hurry. They are in a hurry because they have to go to a function, they have to attend a function, and Mr. Shinde asked Mrs. Shinde to get ready faster. But Mrs. Shinde is very worried because she realizes that her gold chain that she's supposed to wear is missing. And now she tells Mr. Shinde that her gold chain is missing, and she thinks that maybe the gold chain that is missing is being stolen by Shanti. Now Shanti is the domestic worker of their home. Now they think that the gold chain that they are worried about that is missing is stolen by the domestic helper, the domestic worker Shanti. Now what does Mr. Shinde does? Mr. Shinde directly goes to Shanti and asks her if she has stolen the chain, but she obviously will deny it even if she has. So she denies it completely that she hasn't stolen the gold chain, and then he goes to check his trunk. Now basically the trunk of Shanti where all her stuff is kept in their home. Mr. Shinde goes and checks her trunk where all her stuff is kept, and from there he finds an envelope which has rupees 10,000 in it. And he assumes that maybe this envelope has 10,000 rupees because she first stole the gold chain and then she sold it, stole the gold chain and then she sold it in the market and earned this rupees 10,000. So basically he assumed this entire story. Now what happened next? He again asked Shanti, and he asked him continuously whether she has stolen the gold chain or not. She continuously did not accept it. She denied that fact that he had stolen the gold chain, and the next thing that Mr. and Mr. Shinde did was that they went to the police station and filed a FIR against Shanti, okay, saying that Shanti has stolen the gold chain. Now the police officers directly put Shanti into the jail without any kind of evidence, and they were continuously asking her if she has stolen the gold chain or not, and she was still denying that fact. Now what happened? After long hours after she was kept in the jail, her brother came finding her to the police station, and he continuously pleaded the police officer to release her as she hasn't done anything. Now the police officer said one thing. The police officer told to Shanti's brother that in case that he feels that that Shanti hasn't done anything, then he can release her on bail. Now what do we mean by bail here? So basically bail is when the person who is in the prison gets released on a temporary basis by giving some money to the police officer. So that is basically getting released on bail, when you give some amount to the police officer and get released on a temporary basis. So now here Shanti's brother says that you're asking us to get released on bail, but we do not really have any money, and all of the money that we have saved, that was rupees 10,000, has also now been taken by Mr. Shinde. Now what do we do? So now this led to a lot of argument between Shanti's brother and the police officers, and the police officers also put Shanti's brother into the jail, and they started beating Shanti's brother because they wanted him to confess that Shanti and him has stolen the chain, but the two of them did not do it, so they did not confess it also. So now what happened next was that the police officers asked that, okay, now you haven't stolen the gold chain, you are not accepting this, now we'll meet in the court directly. Okay, Mr. and Mr. Shinde had filed the petition against you in the court, now we'll meet in the court. Now here, in response to the statement by the police officer, Shanti says that how can we meet in the court? We do not even have the money to hire a lawyer. Now Let's understand this. Okay, so there is an article in the constitution which says article 22 and 39A says that if in case that there is any person or citizen of the country who does not have the money to afford a lawyer, the government is responsible for giving the lawyer on their expense to that particular citizen. So in this case, government provided a defense lawyer to Shanti so that she could fight for her case, right, on their expense. Now the government has to give the entire expense for the lawyer on the behalf of Shanti, because Shanti cannot afford to hire a lawyer. Now here the government provides her a lawyer so that she can fight a case on the expense of the government according to the article 22 and 39A. Now what happened next? Now the government has also provided a lawyer to Shanti. Okay, now what is happening next? Now the case has now gone to the court. The police has filed a charge sheet to the magistrate. Now what do we mean by filed a charge sheet? So basically, to tell the judge about the entire case that has happened, the police won't verbally tell it to the judge, but it will file a charge sheet. A charge sheet comprises of the time the crime has happened, about the crime that has happened, and about all the interrogation and the investigation that has been done regarding the crime, and all the evidence that has been collected regarding the crime. So basically the crux of the crime is written on the charge sheet and is provided to the judge, to the magistrate. Now the magistrate reads and gets to know about the crime, and the case starts in the court. Okay, so now when the case has started in the court, there is a person who is known as the public prosecutor. Now what does this person means? Now understand this concept very carefully. Now basically this person, public prosecutor represents the person who has filed the FIR, which is Mr. and Mrs. Shinde. So basically the crime has happened, the theft has happened to Mr. and Mrs. Shinde. So they have filed a petition against Shanti. So Shanti will get a defense lawyer, okay, but Mr. and Mrs. Shinde will get a prosecutor by the government who will be responsible for making the accused person guilty, who is Shanti in this case. So the prosecutor is basically a person who helps in the law proceedings and is responsible for making the accused person guilty. So he's basically the representative of the the person who has filed the petition, which is Mr. and Mrs. Shinde. Now, why is it so that they haven't been given the lawyer and they have been given the prosecutor? It is because that whenever a case is filed, it is not filed between Mr. and Mrs. Shinde versus Shanti. It is basically state versus Shanti, because the crime has happened against state. Since Mr. and Mrs. Shinde are the citizens of the state, we write that the crime has happened against the state. So the crime basically has happened between state and Shanti. So we always write that state versus Shanti, because state will represent the people who have filed the petition. State will represent the people against whom the crime has happened, because they are the citizens of the state and the state is responsible for giving them the justice. So anytime if a crime has happened, the people who filed the petition, their name is not mentioned, but state represents them. So state versus the people who are accused. So in this case it will be state versus the Shanti. So in this case, the prosecutor is responsible for making the accused person guilty against the state. So a prosecutor is a person who is basically appointed by the government to the people who have filed the petition, who have filed the FIR against the accused person, and this person is basically responsible for all the proceedings, all the law proceedings, and he is responsible for making the accused person guilty on the behalf of the people who have filed the FIR, who have filed the petition in the court. Okay, so after the case has started in the court, now you might wonder that what was the last decision of the judge. Now what basically happened while all the interrogation was happening between the prosecutor and the defense lawyer, there was a lot of interrogation that you might have watched in movies, how one lawyer interrogates to the other party and the prosecutor interrogates to the accused person. What happens in the court, right? So it started happening, the interrogation happened and all of the questions started popping out. And the last decision that was made was that during the entire fight in the court, there was a news that came that there has been a theft in the neighborhood of Mrs. Shinde's house, right? And the group of boys who were involved in the theft, they were asked to basically show all the things that they have stolen, right? And all the things came outside, and just to just to link both the cases, because this case was very different from the case that happened in the neighborhood. Mr. and Mrs. Shinde's case did not linked. It was very different. It's not very different, but there were two different cases, right? But just to make sure whether because the two cases that happened at the same moment, and they were both related to theft. Okay, so the police just wanted to confirm that those group of boys were not involved in the theft of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde. And believe me, what happened, that the group of boys that were involved in the theft of the neighborhood in the neighborhood of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde were the same boys that were involved in the theft of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde's home. Now, what happened when they were asked to show all the things that they have stolen? One of them was gold chain of Mrs. Shinde, and she she saw her gold chain and she was like, yeah, this is my gold chain. And so the entire case was solved there, that she was able to recognize her gold chain amongst all the stuff that was stolen by the group of boys that were involved in the theft in the neighborhood of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde. So now over here it was quite evident that Shanti and brother did not do anything, but the group of boys that were involved in the theft in the neighborhood of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde's house were the same boys that stole the gold chain of Mrs. Shinde. So over here the judge made a decision, made the judgment that the accused person are not guilty. Shanti is not guilty or whatever crime that she has been accused for. She is not at all guilty. The other boys are guilty of this crime. So this is what the entire case was, and this is how the entire criminal justice of India works. That is, someone feels that the crime has happened to them, they go to the police station, they file the FIR, and then in case that the police feel that the accused person is guilty, he or she goes to the court. Then the case is filed against the accused person, and then the case starts in the court. Okay, so the key players of the criminal justice system were the police that is involved in writing the FIR. Okay, the second one is public prosecutor, who is basically represents the state. The state are the people who writes the FIR against the accused person, basically the people against whom the crime has happened. Okay, and this public prosecutor is basically someone who represents the state on the behalf of them in the court, and he is the same person who is responsible for making the accused person guilty in the court by representing the state. Okay, the defense lawyer is basically the lawyer of the accused person who represent them in the court. The judge is the person who makes the judgment at the end of the entire case. We'll discuss all the functions of all these key players in the other slides too. Okay, so here it goes, the role of the police in investigating a crime. Okay, so now let's understand what is basically the role of the police while the police is investigating. Okay, so we all know that police is basically responsible for investigating, for interrogating a crime, for basically recording the statements of the witnesses, for collecting the evidences, and so on and so forth. So we all know that when a crime has taken place, those are the victims with whom the crime has happened, goes to the police station, files a FIR, and the police officer starts to investigate, right? What do? They go to the place where the crime has happened. You might have watched it in the movies, right? That they go to the place where the crime has happened, then they start interrogating, maybe with the neighborhood. They will start asking the questions like, what was the last time that you saw this person, or when was the last time that you saw any person going into this home. You might have heard these kind of questions being asked by the police at the time of interrogation from maybe the neighborhood or the shops that are in the neighborhood of that house where the crime has happened. They basically start collecting the evidences. Maybe a murder has happened in the house, and they start collecting the evidence, like maybe something something is kept near the body, so they will collect that as an evidence to prove who has done the murder. So basically they will collect these short small evidences. They will record the statement of the witnesses. They will start interrogating in the neighborhood, etc, etc. So these are the roles of the police while investigating a crime. Okay, and a charge sheet is filed if evidence points to the person's guilt. Now, as we discussed in the case of Shanti, wherein basically those 10,000 rupees were something which were used as an evidence that Shanti has stolen the chain. So that was basically very indirect yet very small evidence. That was not even a full-fledged evidence, but still she was put in the jail. But in case that police feels that there is a very strong evidence against the accused person, so the police will file a charge sheet in the court saying that these are the evidence and these are the recordings of the witnesses, and they feel that the accused person is guilty. In case the police feels that the accused person is guilty after the entire investigation, the police will file a charge sheet in the court as they did in the case of Shanti. Okay, so as we know that the police is responsible for investigating, interrogating, collecting the evidences, so and so forth. So basically it has to follow some guidelines while it is investigating. Okay, so according to Article 22 of the Constitution, police also has to follow some guidelines while investigating. It has to make sure that while it is interrogating, while it is asking questions to the other people in the neighborhood, or collecting the evidences, or interrogating, or recording the witnesses, the statements of the witnesses, it does not has to violate the fundamental rights of people. It does not has to harm anybody physically or mentally. It does not have to ill-treat anybody, right? So there are some basic guidelines that the police has to follow. Now one of them is to be informed of the offense. Now basically Article 22, right at the time of arrest. So as I told you that there are to be some guidelines which are to be followed while police follow the process of investigation. That is, the police does not has to violate the fundamental rights of any person. The police does not should ill-treat any person while it is investigating. The police should not beat any person while it is investigating. Basically does not violate the fundamental rule of people and not ill-treat with people. Okay, and there are some rights which are to be given at the time of arrest to the person who is being arrested. Now understand these rights one by one. To be informed of the offense. So basically the person who is being arrested, he or she should be informed entirely of what he has done. It's not possible that the police goes to their house, knock, okay, open the door, and the police directly put that person, forcibly take the person to the jail, forcibly take that person to the police station and put that person into the jail. No, the person will go to their place, will tell them whatever they have done, respectably take them to the police station and put them into the jail. Yeah, the case is another when they are not coming, when they are not accepting and the evidence are in the favor that they are guilty. Then in that case the police officers obviously have to forcibly push them into the jail. But in case that they are accepting their crime, the first step that the police has to take is to politely tell them whatever they have done and take them respectably to the police station. Okay, not at initially they do not have to forcibly take them to the police station. In case that they denies and doesn't come, even all the evidence are in the favor of the accused person, then the police officers are not left with any other option but to force the accused person. But in the initial case, but in the first case, they do have to inform the accused person. They do have to tell the crime that they have committed and respectably take the person to the police station. The second, to be presented before a magistrate within 24 hours of arrest. Okay, so in the case of Shanti, as we understood that when she was kept in the jail, okay, after some time she was in the court, right? She was presented in the court after police charged her, after police filed a charge sheet, right? So the same is to be done when a person, accused person, is put in the jail because of some crime that he or she has attempted. Within 24 hours, that person has to be presented in the court. That is a rule, okay? Not to be ill-treated or tortured during arrest or in custody. So whenever the person is kept in the jail, as we discussed, as we saw in the example of Shanti, wherein Shanti was put in the jail because the evidences were in the favor that she has stolen the chain, so she was put in the jail. Now while she was put in the jail, the police is not allowed to ill-treat her, beat her, okay? So this is what this writer is trying to tell, that when the accused person in the jail is in the jail, the police is not allowed to ill-treat or beat, okay? Confessions made in police custody inadmissible. Now what does this mean? Understand this. Now, for instance, that the accused person is in the jail, okay? And okay, so let's understand this right, okay? Basically, let's say that a person is being put in the jail. The accused person is put in the jail, okay? The person, first of all, won't be ill-treated according to one of the rights, right? When he is in the custody, he won't be ill-treated. But let's assume that the accused person says that, okay, I have done this crime. He basically confesses in front of the police officer that he has done the crime. Now, obviously, the police cannot, when the accused person and the police officer and the people who filed the petition in the case goes to the court, the police officer cannot tell the judge that this accused person confessed to me in the police station that they have done the crime. The judge won't believe. The judge won't believe whatever it is confessed in the police station. The judge, in order to listen again, will ask, okay, in the court, that have you done the crime? If the person would confess it again in the court, that particular statement will be validated for this judgment that the judge will make at the end of the court and at the end of the case, okay? But any statement that is confessed in the police station or outside the court does not matter. It does not get considered. It is not at all validated. Even though it is said full-fledged, loud in front of the police officer, it is not validated until it is spoken in front of the judge, to the judge. Even though the accused person told with his mouth that yes, he is the one who has done the crime, and the police officer tells to the judge that in the police, in the court, in the police station, he confessed that he has done the crime. The judge won't actually make the judgment on the basis of what he said in the police station. In order to make the final judgment, he will ask the accused person again, and accused person, if denies on the spot that no, I did not confess anything like that, or I did not do it, then the judge cannot do anything. Even though he knows that he is the one who might have confessed, or he is the accused person, but still the judge cannot make the decision on the behalf of whatever he said in the police station. The accused person will have to say it in the court. Only then the judge will be able to make the judgment on the basis of that statement. Only then the statement will get considered if said in the court in front of the judge. Any statement made outside the court, even though in front of the police station, will not get validated. So this is what this right means. Women and boys under age 15 years cannot be taken to the police station only for the questioning. So this is quite evident what it is. This is quite self-explanatory that women and boys who are under the age group of 15, they cannot be taken to the police station for any kind of investigation, interrogation, etc. Okay, moving forward. So there is basically a slide which says DK Basu guidelines. Now, who is DK Basu? So basically, DK Basu is a person who used to be a member in a non-political organization. Okay, and let's just assume for now that he is a member of the non-political organization, and one day he realizes that there is a lot of ill treatment done to the people who are in the police custody. Means those people who are put in the jail, who are assumed to be accused, are ill treated very badly by the police officers, and this is wrong. And this person, DK Basu, filed a petition in the Supreme Court saying that some solution is to be made, as people cannot be ill treated like this. So Supreme Court made some guidelines in order to solve this problem, and the guidelines are as follows. Okay, so the very first is that Alright, so the very first guideline says that whenever the police goes to arrest a person, he or she should have a proper identification of his name. Also, you might have seen that police officers have this badge on their chest which tells their identification, which tells their name and their post as a police officer. So the very second is issue memos of arrest attested by the witnesses. Now, what does this mean? So at the time when the person is being arrested, a memo is to be issued wherein the time of the arrest, the date of the arrest, and the reason of the arrest should be mentioned and given to the arrested person. Also, a copy is to be kept by the police officer. The third is to notify the person and their family or well-wishers about the arrest. So when the person is being arrested, he should be given, if the right has been given to that arrested person, to inform his family members or friends about his arrest. So basically, these are the three guidelines by DK Basu. Okay. So first information report. Now, what do we mean by first information report? In the very layman language, in a very simple language, first information report is the first time that the people against whom the crime has occurred tells to the police station about the crime that has occurred, about the offense that has occurred to them, the time and the date, and how it has occurred. So basically, it is the very first information that the victims go and give to the police officers. Okay, so that is the very first information. That is why it is said first information report. The very first time that the victims go in the police station and tells about the crime that has happened, the event that has happened. Okay. So FIR basically includes the time and the date of the offense, and if known, it also includes the date and address of the witnesses and of the accused person also. Alright, so basically there are two types of offenses. There is a cognizable offense and there is a non-cognizable offense. So basically, cognizable offense are the offenses which are which holds more place, like murder or kidnapping or rape and so like that. Okay, and non-cognizable are like we discussed in the case of Shanti, like theft, the cases of theft, like someone stole somebody's old chain. So this is a kind of an example of a non-cognizable offense. So the examples of a theft or an example of a conflict between the two people, or etc. So basically, the offenses which are not that big, and cognizable offenses are the offenses which are very big, like murder or kidnap or rape and etc. Alright, and here it is a statement that is written that the law states that it is compulsory for an officer in charge of a police station to register an FIR whenever a person gives information about a cognizable offense. So, for example, there is a murder, okay, and on the spot the police is able to catch the murderer. He won't put that murderer directly into the jail if he hasn't written the FIR, if an FIR hasn't been filed. So, in any case, if the murderer is being caught on the spot, still the police cannot put that person into the jail. It is very compulsory for the police officers to write the FIR first. Like if the event has occurred, if the crime has occurred, the people with whom it has occurred will have to go to the police station and file the FIR. It is very important. It is made compulsory by the law that FIR is to be filed. No matter the murderer is caught on the spot and put into the jail. The FIR is very important. It is made compulsory by the law that even though the person is, the person is caught on the spot or after 5 years, the FIR has to be filed in case of a cognizable offense. Okay, so there are two questions. Let's do it one by one. So the very first says that was it legal for the police to detain Shanti's brother for 2 days? Does it violate the DK Basu guidelines? Okay. So Shanti's brother was basically put into the jail for 2 days without any kind of evidence, without any kind of warrant. Okay. So it wasn't legal for the police to put Shanti's brother into the jail. It was not legal. And does it violate the DK Basu guidelines? Definitely it violates the DK Basu guidelines. As while arresting a person, a warrant has to be issued as to why he is getting arrested, the time of his arrest and the date of his arrest. Nothing like this was being issued to Shanti's brother, and so it definitely violates DK Basu guidelines. The second question says, did SI Rao do enough to combine evidence before arresting Shanti and filing a case against her? What else do you think he could have done as a part of his investigation? Okay, so yeah, SI Rao, basically the police officer who was in charge of the case of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde was SI Rao. The police officer who was in charge of the case of Mr. and Mrs. Shinde was SI Rao. Okay, I forgot to tell you the name that time, that the police officer who filed the FIR for Mr. and Mrs. Shinde and who was in charge of the entire case was SI Rao. So SI here stands for the Sub Inspector Rao. So Sub Inspector Rao was basically the in charge, and he did not do enough evidence compilation before arresting Shanti, which is definitely true, because she did not really do anything. Getting an envelope of ₹10,000 does not really prove that Shanti has stolen the gold chain. There should have been some more strong evidence in order to arrest Shanti and file a FIR against her. So here SI Rao was at a back foot in quite doing his investigation right. He did not do his investigation right. He just directly filed the FIR and arrested her without doing proper investigation, as in he should have investigated her through various other means, like the SI Rao should has investigated, as in that SI Rao should have asked Mr. and Mrs. Shinde as to where did they see the chain last time, when did they see the last time, when did they see the chain last time. Also, he should have interrogated the houses where Shanti is working or has worked, right, in order to basically get a background referral check of Shanti as to has this theft case or stealing case ever happened before in the houses where Shanti has worked, or has she been a loyal worker. So basically SI Rao should have investigated in the houses where Shanti has been working or has worked, in order to get a little background about Shanti, in order to know if she is a loyal worker, or has there been any similar case before in the houses where she has worked. So in this entire investigation, Mr. SI Rao would have been more clear as to is the accused person is guilty or not. But SI Rao just arrested Shanti on the basis of what Mr. and Mrs. Shinde told him. So this was completely wrong, and he did not do his homework properly. He did not do the investigation properly. He just directly arrested and filed the FIR against her with the reference of what Mr. and Mrs. Shinde told SI Rao. So this was completely wrong. Alright, so this brings us to the end of this video. We will meet in the next video. We'll connect in the next video. Until then, thank you so much for joining me on Study Room.